Hello and welcome to The Power of Persuasive Copy, 7 Secrets for More Effective Writing. I am your host, your presenter today. My name is Laura Peterson, or you can find me at Laptop Laura on social media or on copythatpops.com. And this is what my little art icon looks like if you want to find my podcast on iTunes as well. So here's what we're going to cover in this presentation. Number 1, know thy audience. Number 2, good looks will get you further. It's not what you think. Number 3, get personal, or at least allegorical. Number 4, be an OG. Number 5, use the right triggers. 6, think unity. And 7, leverage liking and reciprocity. So we're going to break down each of those together on how you can improve your copy, your writing. But first, a little bit about me. So I believe that psychology plus copy equals red hot results for your business. I've been tutoring since I was in high school myself in the 90s, and I became a teacher in 2006. I have a bachelor's in psychology with a minor in German and a master's in secondary education. I was certified in Arizona to teach math and psychology. I was also certified in California as well. So I taught math, psychology, SAT prep at the high school level, psychology at the community college level, and then podcasting, book publishing, writing, and things like that in business. I'm a serial entrepreneur. So I quit teaching in 2011 to jump into being an entrepreneur full time, and started a tutoring and test prep company, which is still alive today and growing. But over the past few years, I got super into digital marketing. So everything around creating content and getting it out there to grow your brand, your business, increase your authority, and grow whatever business that you want to be a part of. So I consider myself a digital nomad in that I have been to over 40 countries, and I always have my laptop with me everywhere I go, as I can work from anywhere in the world. I am a podcast nerd, so I started listening to podcasts, and then I started working on other people's podcasts for many years, and started my own podcast in April of 2016, which is Copy That Pops that we already talked about. I am a #1 international bestseller on Amazon. So my first book, Copywriting for Podcasters, How to Grow Your Podcast Brand and Business with Compelling Copy. It went #1 the day that it launched in both the US and Canada. And now I help other entrepreneurs and businesses launch podcasts and best-selling books in order to grow their brand authority, get more media exposure, and attract more traffic, leads, conversions for their business. Fun facts for you. I am obsessed with the IT Crowd, which is a British TV show that ran in around 2006 to 2008 or so. I put garlic on everything. And I have a little sidekick named Tuck, who is my dog. Okay, so let's jump into it. #1 is know thy audience. And this is something that you've probably heard before. It is very important, but often skipped. Even I admit that I skipped it in the beginning stages of several of my businesses, to my dismay. You're going to have to do it eventually, so you might as well do it in the beginning. So I know it's a little bit frustrating, but it is very true that you need to know for whom you are creating content, for whom you are writing in order to be most effective. And the context determines certain conventions that you need to follow, best practices, etc. And then you can decide if you want to conform to those conventions or best practices, or if you want to reject them. So what I mean by that is that if you are in the legal field, that field is traditionally more academic and rigid and professional type writing, versus if you're an entrepreneur like me and you're communicating a lot on Facebook and Instagram, there's a bit more leeway for writing in a casual way with slang, emojis, and things like that. So for whom you're writing does determine how you're going to approach it. And then you can also decide if you want to follow the conventions of that group that you're a part of, or if you want to throw them out and say, I'm going to be different and do the opposite. So these pictures that I have up on the screen, we have a grandma and a teenage girl reading. I don't know either of those people, they're stock photos, but CC0, Creative Commons 0 license. But if I'm going to write to my grandmother, or if I'm going to write to maybe a niece who is a teenager, the way that I communicate, even if it's the same information, is going to be different. With the grandmother, I might speak a little more slowly. I might write more formally. With the teenager, I might just text her some very short sentences and phrases with emojis. So the way that you communicate is definitely different. And this goes for business as well. So how do we get to know our audience? Well, if you already have an audience, you can do a survey. Here are 3 different tools you can check out: surveymonkey.com, typeform.com, and google.com/forms, which is my favorite one because I'm obsessed with everything that has to do with Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets, Google Forms, Google Slides. Even this presentation is a Google Slides presentation. Now, if you don't have an audience yet, you're like, whoop-de-doo, how the heck am I supposed to figure it out? Well, you can do some research of competitors and try to figure out what audience they're going after. You can just sit down and have a long, hard think about it and be thoughtful and project what it might be and who they might be. You can do a pretty good job. I know for me, a lot of businesses that I started, I was the target audience for myself. It's kind of like I started a business for where I wish I had had help when I got started. So I was like a few steps ahead of my target audience. So it was really easy for me to have a good idea of who I was going after. But for you, that might not be the case. So you might need to reach out and ask some other people, or just sit down and really be thoughtful and think about it. But either way, you need to put some time into thinking about it before you start writing. Now, the other cool thing that I have on the side is locational triggers during writing sessions. So it's shown that what is around us when we're doing writing impacts how we write. And one of the best ways that you can set up your location, set up the triggers around you to make sure that you write as effectively as you can is, let's say that you are writing for high schoolers. Let's say you have a tutoring company and you're trying to write to attract high schoolers into some after-school program. So what could be a really great thing to do is to maybe go and work at a library after school hours when the thing packs up with high schoolers from the area, so that you're around high schoolers. You're seeing the people for whom you're writing in your vision. Maybe you've been overhearing some of the ways that they're speaking to each other, so it can inform the way that you write. Now, if you're writing for a more academic and professional side of things, then maybe you want to do some work at a university's library or at a place of business that is similar. So if you work in the legal field and you're a digital nomad like me, then maybe you can go and rent some space in a legal firm or, a building that has a bunch of lawyers running all over the place. So just think about putting yourself in the right environment to cue the right words and the right associations with who you're going to write for, because it definitely is going to help inform your writing and make it more effective. Okay, number 2, good looks will get you further. So there is a stereotype called the physical attractiveness stereotype, and we are talking about people in that sense. So people who are seen to be physically attractive are also rated as likely to have other positive characteristics, even if it's not true. So, or at least relative to someone else who's less attractive if you never met them. So we tend to say if someone is attractive, we tend to also rate them as more intelligent or more capable. So there is a stereotype to things that look good as being better overall in other ways. So we want to apply that also to the visuals around our writing. Okay, I'm not just talking about people now. Let's transition it to the actual writing. So you get a very small split second in person-to-person interaction, and even when someone comes and visits your website, you get a very, very short time to catch someone's attention and give them a good first gut impression. So we are processing information constantly. We're bombarded with information. Our brains are programmed and trained to make decisions quickly based off of a few bits of information in our like full first impression of what is coming at us. Now, part of that is based on evolution, because back in, the olden days when we were hunters and gatherers and we didn't come across a lot of new things all the time, if we turned the corner and all of a sudden saw a stranger, that could mean extreme danger. So we would have to be able to read their facial expressions, read other cues about them to know instantly, is this a threat and I need to run or fight? Or is this a friend and we can cooperate and maybe, work together on something? So our brains are trained for hundreds of thousands of years to make fast decisions about things. And that even is true with presentations, websites, the way that your stuff looks in writing. Then the second part of that bullet right there is confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is a psychological principle or tendency for us to look for information that reinforces a belief that we already hold. So once someone has a gut reaction about you or your website, your writing, your book, your PDF, whatever it is, they're going to then subconsciously, they're not actively doing it, but it's running in the background. They're going to be looking for other bits of information and evidence to reinforce their belief already. So if they pull up something of yours that's writing and instantly they're like overwhelmed or confused or annoyed or whatever, they're going to then start scanning and looking for other bits of evidence that reinforce that belief that they already have. So you want to have a good first impression because it's going to set the tone for everything else. This is in person and also with your writing. So let's talk a little bit about your copy specifically. How it looks affects the perception of everything about you and your brand. So if you have giant blobs of text, if you open up an email or open up your webpage and it's just solid text, people are going to just instantly feel like, this person is too wordy. This person is maybe confused because it feels like stream of consciousness. Maybe the writing is just like, throw up on the page. They might feel like you don't respect their time because they're busy and you're expecting them to read this whole long giant thing. So we want to eliminate blobs, big blobs of text. Just say no. You have to throw out the rules from school. It doesn't matter that your teacher said that a paragraph had to be a minimum of like 4 or 5 sentences. No more. I would say like 2 or 3 lines. No matter how many sentences it are, lines, like actual lines of text. After that, put a break into it. Or you can, like we have in the second bullet and demonstrating this exact tip, is to actually use bullet points, use information points. So break things up into a list, so it's easier to scan it, it's easier to comprehend it and process it without a lot of cognitive effort. Also, use bold or italics and underlines selectively. Don't go crazy with it, because if you do it too much, then it's like all distracting. On that note, don't do a bunch of crazy fonts and colors either, because more than like 2 colors, 3 colors max, and people start just getting overwhelmed. Is this a button? Am I supposed to click on it? Is this hyperlinked? I'm not sure. Is this important? I don't know. So don't get too crazy with too many frills and colors and different types of bolds and fonts. And then the last thing here is you want to think about scanning. So think about your own behavior. Imagine you go to a new website, a new web page. How do you engage with that page? I know I personally will often scan the entire thing. Let's say it's a blog. I'll scan it and I'll read the different headlines. I'll look at the pictures. I'll see if there's little like bullets and easy things that I can pull out. And if it looks too boring or overwhelming or confusing, I just bounce. I scan first, and if it does grab my attention, like, okay, this seems worthwhile, then I'll go back and I'll actually read it from there. So you want to keep that in mind in all of your writing that you do. People are busy. They are bombarded with information. So make it attractive visually for scanning so that someone will say, yes, I'm going to commit to coming back and reading this more fully. Okay, so this is just a little screenshot of a section on my website that I just wanted to give you a visual example of how you can break things up. So on here, you can see I've got a sentence that's 1.5 lines. Then another line that is bold because I'm identifying this is the big part that's going to now be listed below. And I have 4 items under the bullet. Then under that, I have ... Then you're in the right place. So it shows it's a continuation from the bullets, but I'm trying to give you space to kind of breathe and be able to scan. Then I have got something in bold that I want to draw your attention to, and one last line with a hyperlink. So our Facebook group is hyperlinked, and then also the button is hyperlinked. So it's very clear what you can click on and what is a button. And if you do want to join that Facebook group, you can go to copythatpops.com/Facebook, copythatpops.com/Facebook, and that is our best-selling author posse. So if you have interest in writing, self-publishing, and marketing a book and hitting bestseller, then come on over. We'd love to have you in there. But here, I just wanted to show you an example on a page where there's plenty of space to breathe. Nothing is a giant blob. We're using bullets and selective bolding to communicate what we want to communicate clearly. So it's something that's really easy to scan. Okay, number 3, get personal, or at least allegorical. So we've been talking, we are barraged by information all of the time. So how do you stand out? Well, one of the best ways to do that and to stay memorable is through storytelling. So storytelling is one of the oldest forms of human communication. Way before we could write and print things in books or jump on social media, we were telling stories face to face around a campfire or passing stories along from town to town, and they would spread. So our brains love stories, and we can connect to it, and we can process it and understand things really well through stories. And then allegorical, so that's like you could think of it as like a fable, or maybe not a real story, but it's an analogy. So it's a story that represents something. So think in terms of sharing true stories from yourself, or stories and analogies and fables and examples, allegories that can help illustrate a point and help someone wrap their head around really quickly. So yes, stories, it helps our brains process and remember information better. So think back to your favorite teachers in school. They probably were telling stories. I remember I had a teacher, what was his name? I can't even remember his name, but he was for AP European History. Mr. Skidmore, it just came to me. That was sophomore year, I believe, in high school. And I looked forward to every single class, because every time we'd come in, he'd sit down and tell us this most fantastical story that was real about different things, kings and queens running all over Europe doing crazy stuff. So I just loved it and looked forward to it. And I did better on tests because I was really captivated by those stories. So keep that in mind with your writing as well. A great approach is to even open up an email with a story and just start midway through a story and get people hooked in right away. All right, so tell true stories from your life, from your customers' experiences. So maybe you have a client that experienced XYZ and they're comfortable with your sharing it. You don't even have to share their name, but you could just say a client experienced this. Things that maybe you heard in the news. So you could tell a story about what just happened in the news that you saw, or a story about what happened on the way into work. Just make sure then you tie it back to the business thing. We're not there just to start rambling to people. It needs to have a point, but start with a story and then tie it into a lesson or tie it into something that's relevant for your business. So I might say, when I wrote my first book last year, well, at the time of this recording, by the time you're seeing this, it's probably not last year anymore. But when I wrote my book, here's what happened to me. I took 30 days, yada, yada. I can explain it and then tell you lessons I learned. Or maybe last month, a client of mine discovered that. So the second thing, use metaphors, analogies, or fables to help connect your message to something easier to process and remember. So for 2 examples, everyone knows the story of David and Goliath. So maybe if you're trying to position your own business, you could talk about how you are the David and the other competitors are the Goliath. And so you can rally people behind your cause because everyone, roots for David. So you can use stories that aren't necessarily true, but that everyone knows and everyone can relate to. Another one, Sherlock Holmes was able to solve cases by looking at what was absent. So Sherlock Holmes is a really cool character in fiction, and you could talk about how he was able to identify what was missing in order to draw a conclusion. And then you could relate that into something that you're doing with your brand and business, in something that you're communicating with your client, and talk about how you guys, really listen and you look for what is missing, not just what is present, to really help make sure that you deliver the best customer service or whatever. So just think of ways that you can tie things into stories. Number 4 is be an OG. So I'm assuming you know what OG means, original gangster. It's just a silly slang way of saying be original, be unique, be yourself. So there is literally no one else like you. Don't hide that. Don't try to be a cookie cutter copy of everybody else out there. I know that for me, when I got started as well, I looked at what other gurus were doing or other influencers I looked up to, and I tried to take bits and pieces of things that I liked and make them my own. But finally, when I just said, I know what, I don't even care what anyone else is doing, I'm just going to be me, that's when things started to really click for me in my writing, in my communication, in growing my audience, because people can just sense that when you're being true and authentic. There's just like a feeling about it. So start that from the beginning. You can look at other people and see examples for sure. I mean, that's how we learn. We're social creatures and we learn from modeling and seeing what other people are doing, but don't do what everyone else is doing and push your own self away. Be original, be yourself. So how do you stand out? Well, you stand out by standing out. Show your personality. So I'm a little bit nerdy, kind of quirky. Like, I mean, maybe not that quirky, but I like to make jokes and be a little bit silly. And so I let that happen and let it come out. And if some people don't like that, oh, well, we'll talk about that in a second with polarizing. But you just ultimately, if you're not having fun and enjoying what you're doing, what's the point of it anyway? So be yourself. And it's going to just make your writing that much more clear, impactful to the right people. The third one here. So throw out writing conventions that don't suit your style or goals. So for me, if I were a lawyer, it wouldn't work for me to be like just so robotic. I would still put my own flair into it. Now, of course, maybe there are certain regulations that you have to write a certain way to get things passed through the courts or whatever. But if I'm communicating with a layperson who isn't a legally trained person, I'm going to want to adjust my conversation, my word choice, and everything to make them feel comfortable and make sure that they understand. So you can choose to throw out the standards of your industry or your generation or whatever and choose what you want to choose, as long as you know who your audience is and you're able to make sure that you're really connecting with them and serving them well. Now, in terms of polarizing, they always say that if you don't have haters, you're not doing enough, or you're not, putting yourself out there enough. I have bad reviews on my book. I have bad reviews on my podcast. It is what it is. That's going to happen. If you expect everyone to like you, you're going to end up just staying so much in the middle that you're never going to actually grow an audience of people who really are excited by your stuff. So if you write in your true voice and are really truly yourself in your copy, in your writing, you're going to attract people who love that about you, and they're going to want to follow you and subscribe to your stuff and buy your products and services over somebody else's, because it's going to really connect with them. So don't push that away and just try to be bland, because if you're bland, there's a billion of those. Why would they pick yours? Okay, so polarizing can even mean take a strong stance on something in your writing. It can often even start out like, let's say we're talking about a story. You could talk about something kind of controversial and almost start out like it seems like you support one side and be polarizing in that way. But then through the rest of the story, you can show, okay, here are both sides, and actually here's the conclusion that you want to draw. So you can use different techniques like that, but make sure that you're not watering stuff down, because that's not going to get you anywhere. All right, so I took a little screenshot here. This is another section on my website. It's just a little blurb about me. So you can see that I don't have any blobs of text. I'm using strategic bolding, but I wanted to show you on the left-hand side here, I ended it with XO Laura, so hugs and kisses, or however, I don't know which order that means, but that's very informal, and that is my style. So that works for me. It may or may not work for you. Over here on the right, I've got two little hearts. That's an emoji. I like to add different emoticons because oftentimes with writing, we don't have facial expressions and body language to really communicate everything, and people could take things the wrong way. Not that they would in this instance, but I like to use smiley faces to kind of soften things, or faces really like sticking out your tongue when you're making a joke, when otherwise it might come off a little bit harsh if they didn't realize that it was a joke. And then I also have a little hashtag. So my dog Tuck, I have the hashtag of chill as Tuck on Instagram. So I put that in there, and that's just another way to just show flavor, show that I am fun and I like digital media and am not afraid to use hashtags, even if it doesn't really seem relevant. Okay, number 5. So our 5th secret for effective copy. So using the right triggers. So I want to ask you a question. Can we fully separate emotion from anything that we do? I would argue to a certain degree, no. We humans are emotional creatures, and everything that we see in the world, everything that we process is going through our own filters in our mind. So anything that we think to be true is not 100% reality because it's processing through our own perceptions, our own filters, our own beliefs, ideas, expectations, previous experiences. So because of that, we need to be very aware that other people are feeling this as well. So everyone else is also filtering through everything with their own set of beliefs, expectations, emotions, feelings, whatever. So you can use certain words to help be more persuasive in your writing, or this is not to manipulate, but to help guide someone toward a conclusion or toward thinking down a certain path, but just the words that you choose. So there's this example of a study where a bunch of people were given an article about crime just spreading all over the city. So 2 sets of readers, they were completely random. So whoever got one article versus the other was completely random. And both articles were identical except for one word. So in one article, they talked about the crime as being a ravaging beast terrorizing the city. And in the other one, they talked about crime being a ravaging virus that was terrorizing the city. Afterwards, they then surveyed these folks who had read the articles and asked them what kinds of solutions they would most be likely to support to take care of this crime issue. The people who had read Ravaging Beast were more likely to support things like being tougher on criminals, longer sentences, things that were punishing the people, because beast makes it seem like the crime is a problem with the people, we need to cage them up and throw away the key. The people who had read it with a virus were more likely to support solutions that dealt with the systemic issues. So things like prison reform or poverty, reducing poverty and increasing jobs so that people were less likely to turn to crime. So by just one word switch, people's minds were completely different about what kind of solutions that they were more likely to support and suggest. So that just shows you the power of words. Don't just throw it away as some afterthought. It is very important. The other thing with think and feel I wanted to talk to you guys about, if you're ever writing back and forth with a client and maybe you're trying to close a deal and you're having some communication in written or even spoken, and you can tell somebody is very cerebral and logical and processing details and data, you might want to say something like, I think this solution is right for you. I think this product is right for you. Versus someone else who seems very in tune with their emotion and, I'm trying to think of how else to describe them, but like they're very connected and more touchy-feely type of a person, then what you might want to say, I feel like this is the right product for you. I feel like this is the right solution for you, because you're more speaking their language. Someone who is very logical is going to be more connected with you if you say, I think this is right for you. And someone who's more in touch with their feelings is going to be more connected if you say, I feel like this is right for you. So even just that one word right there in the way that you communicate with a client can make a difference, because you're showing them that you're understanding the way that they process and need things. But it's very all subtle. Like this isn't like they're going to notice that you chose that word over the other, but it can make a difference. It can make a positive impact on your effectiveness. Word choice for branding. So bullet has a negative connotation. So if we say bullet point, even though bullet point has nothing to do with a weapon, we still think about bullet in terms of violence and inside of guns. So there are some organizations, there's this one health organization that refuses to use the word or the phrase bullet point. They'll only say information point. Or instead of saying we have certain targets this quarter, they'll say we have certain goals. Or instead of saying we are going to beat the competition, they'll say we're going to outpace the competition. So they're still very achievement oriented without using words that also have a negative connotation. And according to research, this does have an impact. So it is not something to just brush aside and think, oh, that's silly and that's ridiculous. These are some cool psychological studies that you can learn more about. One book in particular is called Persuasion by Dr. Cialdini out of ASU. Check that one out. So when you're thinking about words that you're choosing in your emails, on your website, on your social media profile, on your business card, everywhere, think about what kind of image you want to paint in the mind of the reader. Because all of our communication, all that it's doing is persuading someone to imagine or go down a certain path based on what you're presenting to them. So the words that you choose are very important in helping drive the picture that you want to drive. All right, what is next? So still on using the right triggers. Focus, my last tip, focus on what the reader wants. Okay, so once you know who your audience is and you're aware of the power of words, you're starting to get in tune. Is this someone who's more logical or more emotional? Are we going to use think or are we going to just feel, those types of things? Also, really make sure that you start any interaction with them in writing or even on spoken, not with what's in it for you, not what you want, but what's in it for them. So there are a lot of times, mostly it's spammy emails, that I'll open it up and it'll say, hi, I'm the CMO of such and such company, and I have these awards, and I have a lot of great stuff in my business. So I think that you should have a call with me so I can tell you all about what you're missing with my amazing product or whatever. Or I'm so awesome, you should have me on your podcast. These emails, I instantly hit archive on them because I just feel like it's disrespectful, because we all get so many emails these days. If someone isn't taking the time to figure out what I want, what I need in my business, it's rather presumptuous to think that I have time in my day to just figure out what you need and just give it to you. So that's how people are feeling when you send something to them. So make sure that you start things out with what you can give them. So for the podcast example, if someone were to reach out to me and say, hi, Laura, love your show, especially this episode where you talked about XYZ. So you're proving you actually listened to it. One thing I saw missing is you haven't talked about persuasive copy in Instagram posts or something. And I happen to be an expert in that. Here are some elements of proof. If it works for you, I'd love to come on your show and share this information with your audience. I feel like it would be a great fit. Then I'm like, oh, okay. It was customized. They're really thoughtful about it. They saw maybe where I might have a need, and I might be thinking, oh, I've been wanting to interview someone on Instagram about Instagram, but I didn't know anybody. So think about what the other person wants, not just what you want. The second point here, features versus benefits. You may have heard that in another presentation or elsewhere. It is a good one to keep in mind. So we tend to say stuff like, oh, buy this phone. It has a blue shiny case and it is 3 inches by 6 inches and it is really sturdy. It doesn't break. Yeah, right. Instead of saying the benefits, like, you can talk to your parents whenever you want. You can check the weather before you go outside. You can instantly get the answer to anything by talking to Siri or whatever. So we want to not just describe the products and services that we offer, like the actual details of what they get tangibly, but rather the benefits. What is the end result? What's the transformation that they're going to receive as a result of it? That's what we want to focus on. And then the third point here is the power of because in favor asking. So there's another really cool study where they had people cutting in line, asking if they could say, hey, can I cut in line? I need to make 5 copies on this copy machine. This is back in like the 80s when actually people use those regularly. So if people said, can I cut in line? I need to make 5 or can I please cut in line? I have 5 copies or something like that. Then let's say 40% of people said, okay. But if they added the word because and then a reason, even if the reason was silly, then that percentage jumped up to 90%, 92, 93%. So if they said, I need to make 5 copies because I'm in a rush, then people let them cut more. Or even if they said, I have 5 copies, or can I cut in line because I need to make copies, which is like silly because obviously why would you need to be in this line if you didn't have to make copies? But just putting the word because and a reason shot up compliance with people saying yes to the favor. So keep that little tidbit in mind when you're writing something, you're asking for something, add a because and a reason, and it will increase your success rate. Okay, number 6, think unity. So let me tell you what the fundamental attribution error is. I think you'll find this interesting if you don't know it yet. So we all are prone to, if something goes bad with somebody else, we tend to attribute it to something internally, like they're a bad person. If something goes bad with us, we attribute it to the situation outside of ourselves. For example, let's say you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off in traffic and speeds on by. What do we think? He's a jerk. She's a whatever, fill in a bad word. Something internally. What if we're doing it? If we're speeding down the highway and cut someone off, how do we say it in our heads? We say, well, I'm late for work, or I'm about to go into labor, or my mom is sick and I have to get there, or whatever. So we always are saying outside reasons to justify bad things and internal reasons for others for justifying the bad things. And the reverse is also true for the good things. So we tend to over attribute good results to ourselves internally. Like, well, I'm an honest person. That's why I got that promotion or whatever. So keep that in mind. We do have a bias in favor of ourselves versus others. This bias also applies to people that we see as in our own group. So we also have an in-group bias. So people who we consider to be our crew, our homies, our whatever group that we associate tightly with, we tend to also give them favor. Oh, well, she was late because something else must have happened. Whereas someone outside the group, we'd be like, oh, she's late because she's a jerk. So keep that in mind. We tend to do that. How can we use this to our advantage in terms of our writing and other interpersonal communications? So what you want to do is to show other people with whom you're communicating and want to build rapport and influence and persuasion with, you want to show them that you are one of us, one of the group, one of whatever group they closely identify with. This most readily happens with religion, politics, race, ethnicity. So if someone tells me that they believe the same things about religion as I do, I'm instantly like, okay, let's talk because you're awesome. This can also transfer to things less controversial potentially as location. So, oh, you live in San Diego too? Me too. That's so cool. Especially if you're further away and then you both happen to be from the same place, hometown where you grew up, sports affinities, the sports teams, where you went to college, or even just really favorite things. Like I mentioned earlier that I love the IT crowd. If I meet someone who says they love it, I'm like, oh, you're cool. You're one of us. Let's talk. And I start to give them the preferential biases because I feel like they're part of my group. So when you're writing and when you're communicating with people, clients or colleagues or networking, try to find ways where you guys really do have strong overlaps in some of these areas so that you will start to be identified in their minds as someone who is part of the in group with them. Other unity words that you might think about: brotherhood, sisterhood, heritage, motherland. Those might not seem very relevant in business, but something like family or crew or team. You know, a lot of businesses these days are saying team members versus employees. That's a direct attempt to think about unity and start getting people to be thinking as a group, as a collective. So think of different ways that you can use these words in your writing, in your communication with employees, with clients, and how you can make everybody feel a bit more in group and connected. As an example, if you decide to join the Facebook group that I mentioned earlier, where we talk about how to get your book up live on Amazon and bestseller, it is actually called the Best-Selling Author Posse. So I use the word posse because I think it means like group or team, and it's kind of fun and playful. So that's an example. And when I'm inside there, I'm like, hey guys, we got to support the posse. Someone's live today on Amazon. Go buy the book, support them. So just an example of thinking with unity. And number 7, our last one, is leverage liking and reciprocity. So the origin of reciprocity also has to do with back in the day, over the millennia of our developing our genes, thriving in a hunter-gatherer society where we did not have a grocery store in every corner. So in order to survive, you had to work and rely on other people. You could not survive on your own. It just absolutely wasn't possible. It's not even possible now, let's be real. But back then, even more so. So those who were willing to, let's say they killed a buffalo and they were willing to share the meat now, would be more likely to get fruits and berries later when there was no meat available, but another person of the team or the group, whatever you want to call it, the family, the clan, did have a bounty of nuts and berries and things. So being willing to give in order to also then hopefully receive later is a very, selected trait or quality and behavior in human psyche. So this is very built into us. And we tend to like people who give because it's just so ingrained in us. We trust people who give more than people who don't. So we have a lot of bad words for people who aren't givers, like moochers or I can't think of all the bad words right now, but people who just kind of take without giving, we discard them very quickly and we don't trust them. Now, when we do give, or when someone gives us something, we feel this psychological obligation to give back something in return. So restaurant waiters, as an example, you may know right when they come and bring the bill, they might give you a fortune cookie or a mint, or they might be extra nice and pay you a compliment, something like that. So they're doing a little bit extra right at the time of giving the tip because they're hoping that they get something else in return with the tip. If you know about the Hare Krishna, this is a religious group. I don't know the full details of them, but what they'll often do and have since been banned from some public areas is they'll go up and give a flower to somebody. And when this person gets it, they're like, oh, what? Thank you. What is going on? And they're like, no, this is our gift. And you're like, wow, okay, thanks. And then they'll say, this is a gift. You don't have to give me anything. However, if you'd like to make a donation, then we will gladly accept it or whatever. And then a lot of people are like, oh, they feel this indebtedness and they feel this obligation to give money. So it can be a very tricky method used by people in touristy areas. So what can we do in terms of our writing in our business that we are giving and then will hopefully receive things in return? Now, you don't want to just give in order to get and receive, okay? And oftentimes you give to one person and you end up getting back from another. It's like karma or something. But so don't go in just expecting to get something in return. But here's what we can do. So we can give true, genuine compliments or recognize true, genuine instances when we see someone do something good or valuable and share a praise. So it doesn't have to be something physical. It can be in words. So you could write something in an email, praise to a colleague or a client or whatever, and give them true, genuine compliments and praise. It should be, if you're going to give something, it should be meaningful, unexpected, and customized. So meaningful to them. So if I collect musical instruments and you give me for my birthday, like, I don't know, something for my car, like, okay, thanks, but it's not meaningful to me. It might be meaningful to you, but it's not to me. Unexpected surprise and delight is a great thing to do. And then customized, maybe similar to the meaningful one, but you want to make it very clear that this was thoughtful for just that person. So that's going to be in something that you say or something you give. Another thing I feel like forgiving in terms of this reciprocity thing is to actually do what you say you would deliver on. So if you're talking with someone and you say, oh yeah, I'll send you that blog article that I wrote, it's really going to be interesting for you. And then you just like move on to the next networking thing and totally forget about it. You're going to be reducing your likability because you're not being trustworthy. So you want to make sure you deliver on what you say you'll deliver on. Okay, let's talk a little bit more in business, kind of bring it back down to writing and business specifically. So something that you can also give that is a great technique in terms of building your email list and building that rapport, that likability, that anticipation of getting something in return is a free lead magnet. So that's all the rage these days. So it's usually something you can download like a checklist or an ebook or a video training, resource list, something that is valuable to your audience. Why you need to know who your audience is, like we talked about in step 1. So a free lead magnet, if we give this out for free, we're asking for, in exchange, an email address usually. Sometimes you don't even ask that in return, but you're hoping that this is building that rapport with somebody so they're more likely to make a purchase from you later. Forward an article or a tool that made you think of the person. So that's something that you could just do unexpectedly and thoughtfully. If you see something that reminds you of somebody, then you could send that on to the person. You could send an invite to an event or party and be more likely to receive one in return. Handwritten notes are amazing. Holiday cards, birthday messages, something that's a little unexpected these days and thoughtful and customized, meaningful. You could share your best advice in blogs, podcasts, and videos completely for free. So that's just public and open, but just write your best stuff out there for free. And people are going to see that quality and be more likely to want to give you something back in return, like hiring you or passing you along to somebody else. You can also feature written testimonials or video ones that highlight when you over-delivered for a client, because then that gives indicators to other people like, oh, this person is going to give me even more than I may expect in return. You could also write a review for somebody. So I know when I'm trying to grow the reviews of my podcast or my book, which I have a little screenshot over here, and I only have 43 reviews at the time of this recording, which is too low, and I'm going to be doing this exact advice. What I'll do is if I know somebody has a podcast, I'll go listen to an episode, write an honest review, and then just send them a note and say, oh, I just checked out your podcast and I wrote you this review. It's awesome. Usually be like, thanks so much, out of the blue. Right then you could say, if you don't mind, I'd love, they'll say like, oh, can I do something for your turn? Be like, oh, I'd love for you to do one for me too. Here's my link to it. Don't expect that they'll do it back, but you're going to increase the chance if you give something up first. Like, comment on, share others' social posts. I can't tell you how many amazing friends I have, business friends, that just started from liking and commenting on each other's posts. And then it just went from there. And we both saw that we really liked each other and we both were giving without expectation of anything. And it really led to a lot of amazing things. So keep those things in mind. And if you like any of this presentation, if you feel like you got value, I would appreciate your checking out my podcast and leaving a review if you choose to. Okay, so quick recap. We talked about knowing your audience. Good looks will get you further, so the visuals of your writing. Getting personal and allegorical, using stories. Being an OG, so being original. Being unique, showing your personality. Number 5, using the right triggers, so different words that can have a big impact. Thinking about how people do have emotions, can't be fully separated from it, and how can we use what perceptions that they're processing to kind of channel the river towards what we want them to conclude as well. 6, think about unity. So how can we, in our writing, convey that we are like you, not in a manipulative way, but in a real way, find ways to connect. And number 7, leverage liking and reciprocity. So what are the next steps? Well, we just talked about it. Number 1, you could subscribe to my podcast if you kind of like my style and the way that I talk, my sort of quirkiness. It is called Copy That Pops, and it is on iTunes. If you go to copythatpops.com/iTunes, that'll redirect you right over there. You can also find it at copythatpops.com/podcast. That's where you'll find the show notes for each episode, and you can actually listen to the episodes as well right there from your browser. And I talk about, with guests and also solo shows, copy tips, applying psychology. So really the persuasive communication overall. And we look at it in a variety of ways in business. Number 2, if you want to take your writing to the next level in terms specifically of writing a book, then I also have a free training. You can go to copythatpops.com/free-training if you want to learn how to write, self-publish, and hit bestseller with a business book on Amazon. Okay, so I hope to see you guys more. If you want to reach out and talk more about writing and psychology and applying it to business, then I am your girl.